Hello everybody, here we are today talking about if we're going to see a lot of first round upsets in the Stanley Cup Playoffs. But before we get started with that, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me or hockey, whatever the case may be. Being said, let's get on into it. So I'm going to be honest, this is not going to be something that I'm going to hide to the end of the video. I'm just going to go out there and say it. I think that there are going to be upsets, yes, but more so that they factor in because of injuries. That's something that I didn't really want to kind of get mixed up here where people say, oh, well, it's a little bit clickbaity. I try to stay away from that. I think injuries are going to have a massive impact, obviously, in the first round of the playoffs because some teams are really going to be, benefiting from the return of their players from injuries. Other teams are desperately going to be hurting, or if they lose, we could definitely point to some reasons as to why this could be the case. I still think that on a given year, there's going to be normal upsets, so there's still matchups that we don't even know yet. But I did kind of want to take a look at this and see who could be helped, who could be hurt by this. And kicking it off with the teams that could be hurt, we have the Dallas Stars, we have the Vegas Golden Knights, and the Winnipeg Jets. Three teams in the Western Conference that have done very well for themselves. Dallas is looking good. Vegas is looking good. Winnipeg looks to be, again, top of the class in the West, competing out there for top spot in the NHL. But they're all kind of dealing with some ailments. It could be a big blow to them going forward. Dallas Stars, again, Tyler Seguin, Miro Heiskanen, big name players for them. Miro is certainly one that is sticking out there. You just know that with him kind of dealing with this, as well as a team dealing about how we're going to juggle the lineups, when you face a first round matchup, likely against the Colorado Avalanche, that is terrifying because in my eyes, if Colorado beat Dallas, is that really an upset? And the answer to that is no. Even if Dallas was fully healthy, I think this Colorado team could very well push them to the brink and then go out there and win it. So that's why, again, I think that it's an upset to a degree. But Colorado been very aggressive, before the trade period, trying to shore up their goaltending. Been aggressive during the trade period. They have been really, really good, barring that first 5 games of the season. So looking at all that, you can kind of understand that that's an upset. But again, it's not. So moving on, obviously Vegas is going to be possibly taking on, we'll talk about another team eventually later, but in terms of Vegas, they kind of seem to be dealing with some ailments. I don't know if it kind of relates to another team we'll talk about later, where they're healing up instead of resting guys. But Alex Pietrangelo, Jack Eichel are a couple names that I'm aware of that are kind of dealing with some things. And the Golden Knights have kind of battled through that before. Last year was a great example of even getting to the playoffs even though they were injured. And I think there is a train coming up here, so we may have to stop the video unless you guys like to hear the sound of a train. But it's getting pretty close and we're going to just pause for now. Alright, I think it's gone far enough away that I can kind of talk again. But going back to Vegas, the team that they look like they could play in the playoffs, again, things are very, shaky right now in terms of where things will, finish. But if they played that team without some of the players they're getting back, they're going to beat them probably easily within 5 games. Maybe they get pushed to 6. But the return of those players does make it a much more interesting series. That's where I say for this other team that is the mystery team we'll be talking about here in a moment, if they can actually truly pounce on this other side once they get their reinforcements back, they've actually already got them back, and those ailments for Vegas are there, that could be the real potential for them to get knocked out in the first round, which would be very entertaining because that team that I'm going to talk about in a minute has been knocked out by them before. So we'll just push that to the side for now. And then finally, in terms of the teams that are getting hurt, the Winnipeg Jets, they lose Gabriel Velarde. This is a team that I think we're just going to go out there and talk about the matchup that they could have with St. Louis. St. Louis, a team that's been very, very hot, won 12 in a row. The Jets are also dealing with more injuries in general besides just Velarde, but Velarde is not coming back. And that's where you kind of wonder if St. Louis with some momentum really could, maybe win this series, get it done faster. I think that'd be the better way to go. You keep Connor Hellebuck and giving him more opportunities. I'd like to think against a lower seed that he would win. But again, that is going to be one of those things where you talk about what ifs. You realize that St. Louis is momentum, kind of going and pushing them that way, whereas Winnipeg is more consistency, despite the fact they got in a little bit of a rut. But then you're talking about things we don't really have a great idea about in terms of injuries, where we don't get the whole story until, after the Stanley Cup's over, and they're like, yeah, I played with 4 broken ribs and I was completely fine. So for the Jets, just something to keep an eye out for. I don't think they're going to be as bothered as much as some other teams. Dallas is a team that I do feel a little bit more worried for because you want to get more experience with some of these players coming back because you're playing such a strong Colorado side. But yes, absolutely, I think that the Avs could knock out Dallas. St. Louis with Winnipeg, I'd be stretched to see that happen a little bit. Now, teams that are going to get helped by the return of these players likely are the Edmonton Oilers, Florida Panthers, and Minnesota Wild. And we'll just kind of run through these here. Edmonton, not necessarily a deal where they are as impacted as some other guys, but I was listening to 32 Thoughts because, again, I'm just a normal guy like all you guys, and they're talking about how just a couple weeks back, maybe it was a week and a half ago, Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid missed the same game for just like the fourth time in their careers together, which is crazy to me. But absolutely, I'd imagine that paired with the Stuart Skinner injuries as well as a lot of these other things has kind of dampened the standings a little bit for them, because they will go on to play Los Angeles in all likelihood in the the first round. This time they will be the team that's below them in the standings. They're going to have to play Los Angeles at home, and I'm not going to harp on that as much as I have before. Los Angeles is a good team at home. Edmonton may not be, favored as much. I don't know. It still feels very weird, because is this an upset in my eyes? I really don't think so. And in all honesty, I think that LA would just love to see all of Edmonton's guys back and then go out there and beat them and say, we beat your best, and we don't want to hear any of this what ifs. And I would really hope that would be the case. But for LA, at the same time, they wouldn't really be too mad if a star player was out for Edmonton, where they could definitely advance. But this one feels maybe a little bit more evenly matched than in years past. Either way, though, I don't think that we would all be surprised. Say, Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl had a big series. They won it, and they move on to the second round again. And that would be the fourth time in 4 years that Edmonton would beat LA, by the way, in the first round. Anyway, moving on to the Florida Panthers, they've been dealing with a lot of things. The Aaron Ekblad suspension, the Dmitry Kulikov injury. They had Marchand that was injured for a little bit. Matthew Tkachuk, one of their star guys, their go-to guys, he is still out. Hasn't played a game in a minute. These are all things that are going to be hurting this team. And I'm telling you right now, I don't think that is a true upset if they go on to beat Tampa Bay, if they're healthy. This is a team that has seen so much success, and they're locked into the playoffs. The standings don't really match what this team is, I think. Are they as good in years past? Probably not. But this team, if they didn't have the suspension, if they didn't have a lot of these guys out, would be in a better position. And I think in a really good spot to actually just outright take the Atlantic Division over some of these other teams like Tampa Bay, and then a team, of course, like Toronto. Can't say that that's set in stone, but this is where if you're a Bolts fan, you're like, man, I hope some of these guys really don't come back. Florida being Tampa Bay, you would say, well, this team's been in the Stanley Cup playoffs, Stanley Cup final 2 years in a row. Playoffs, like 4 or 5 years in a row now, something like that. So it wouldn't be that crazy. Tampa Bay is improved after their trade period, but I still think we could probably say this one's going to be a 50-50, but if Florida's healthier, you're probably leaning more Florida. I don't know, that's more of a you thing than me. And yes, that elusive team that I didn't talk about earlier is the Minnesota Wild. Joel Eriksson Ek and Kirill Kaprizov make a statement in their return against the San Jose Sharks. That was a return, right? I didn't get to keep up with that one. I knew they were coming back soon. Ek had like 4 goals, and then you had Kaprizov that had 3 points, 2 goals, 1 assist, and an 8-7 win. That's crazy, and this is where I actually do think that this kind of goes hand in hand, where if you have an impactful Kirill Kaprizov and Joel Eriksson Ek returning, not 100%, but an impactful duo there, Minnesota's odds of competing with Vegas are greatly enhanced, especially with that going hand in hand with the potential lingering issues for Vegas. This is something where Minnesota doesn't have a very good record against Vegas in the regular season. They played them before the playoffs, and they pushed them to the brink. What was it, 2023? Maybe in 2020. It was 2022, I believe. But this team certainly does feel like they have the odds of going out there and doing an upset if their star is able to shine. Kirill Kaprizov is going to have to absolutely put up monster numbers. Joel Eriksson Ek going to have to do his thing as per usual. But I don't know. I think that this is one of those deals where Vegas will win, but people will say, oh yeah, of course they're the favorite team, but the standings won't reflect how good of a year Minnesota could have had. Next year, keep an eye out for them if they're more healthy, or more so if their stars are healthier, to where they have more wins and they aren't having to flirt with that as much. But again, I think with how invested these teams have been at the top 3 in their division, primarily Colorado, because Minnesota probably should have finished in the top 3 of the division before the Avs just decided to get hot and get aggressive to try to bolster their cup odds. Minnesota probably should be a top 3 team. Next year, though, again, after a good start to this year, they might actually have to kind of go back to the mindset of, we'll get in likely, but it's going to have to be as a wildcard team. But I do think there's really good odds for some upsets in the first round, more so the seeding, where technically they're a lower seed that could win. But as always, it goes a little bit deeper than that, and I want to hear what you guys have to say. What are some other teams that are going to benefit from this? I think that Carolina is going to greatly benefit from the injuries that the New Jersey Devils had. That's not going to be an upset, but I think that if Carolina lost in the first round, we would obviously say, holy cow, how did that happen? Whereas if they get it done, they're going to make business as usual on to the second round. We have got bigger expectations than that. So again, just kind of throwing that out there as a vice versa thing, where a team that feels like it definitely should get the job done. So leave your thoughts down below in the comments. Also, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe. Have a great night. And you love hockey, alright? Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.